In the 4th century BCE, one man changed the course of history forever. His name was Alexander, the king of Macedon, a ruler whose ambition knew no limits and whose conquests would spread across 3 continents. Today, we tell the story of Alexander the Great, a military genius, a conqueror, and a legend whose empire stretched from the plains of Greece to the heart of India. But what made Alexander the Great? Was he simply a product of fate, or was he the master of his destiny? Born in 356 BCE in the ancient city of Pella, the capital of Macedonia, Alexander's story began under extraordinary circumstances. His father, King Philip II, was one of the most powerful rulers in ancient Greece. His mother, Queen Olympias, was a woman of great ambition and influence, believed to be descended from the gods. Legend has it that on the night of Alexander's birth, the temple of Artemis at Ephesus burned to the ground. An omen, some said, that foretold the rise of a man who would set the world on fire. From the moment he was born, Alexander was destined for greatness. His mother, Olympias, was fiercely protective of him, and his father, King Philip, saw the potential in his son, though his ambition for power sometimes overshadowed his love for him. The early years. Growing up, Alexander was no ordinary child. He was tutored by the greatest philosopher of the age, Aristotle. Under Aristotle's guidance, Alexander learned not only philosophy and science, but also gained an understanding of Greek culture, literature, and the arts. This education would profoundly shape his worldview and influence his leadership style. By the age of 13, Alexander had already demonstrated his sharp intellect and keen military mind. He showed a particular interest in the works of Homer, especially the Iliad, which he read obsessively. Legend says that he slept with a copy of the Iliad under his pillow, and even had the great warrior Achilles as his role model. Alexander aspired to be a hero like Achilles, a man who fought for glory and immortality on the battlefield. The death of King Philip II. In 336 BCE, Alexander's world was forever altered. King Philip II, the father who had built an empire in Greece, was assassinated. At just 20 years old, Alexander became the king of Macedonia. His ascension to the throne was anything but smooth. There were immediate challenges from within the royal court, with rival factions attempting to claim the throne for themselves. But Alexander's response was swift and decisive. He eliminated his rivals and solidified his power. But Alexander's rise to power was only the beginning of his journey. He inherited not only his father's throne, but also his father's vision of a unified Greece. King Philip had dreamed of using Greece as a launching point to invade Persia, and Alexander would carry that dream forward. However, his ambitions were far greater than anyone could have predicted. Conquering Greece and the Greek states. Soon after his father's death, Alexander had to deal with the rebellious Greek city-states, which saw the assassination of Philip as an opportunity to break free from Macedonian rule. One of the most important moments in Alexander's early reign came when he was forced to quell a revolt in Thebes. In 335 BCE, Thebes rebelled against Macedonian control. Alexander responded with force, swiftly marching south to crush the revolt. After a brutal siege, Thebes was destroyed. The city was leveled, and its inhabitants either killed or sold into slavery. This ruthless action sent a clear message to the rest of Greece. Alexander was not a king to be defied. With Thebes subdued, Alexander quickly solidified his power over Greece. He was recognized as the leader of the Corinthian League, a federation of Greek states, and took on the title of hegemon, commander of the Greek forces. However, Alexander had grander plans. He was not content to rule over Greece alone. His sights were now set on Persia, the largest empire in the world at the time. The vision of conquest. Alexander's dream was not simply to conquer, but to unify and rule the known world. He saw himself as the successor of the greatest kings, as well as a liberator of Greek culture. The Persians, led by King Darius III, were the ideal target. For years, the Persian Empire had been a thorn in the side of the Greek world. The Persians had defeated Greek forces at the Battle of Marathon and had sacked Athens during the Greco-Persian Wars. For Alexander, invading Persia was not just a military campaign, it was a chance to avenge the wrongs of the past. But before Alexander could embark on his grand campaign, he first had to deal with the internal challenges of his kingdom. His army needed to be prepared for the long journey ahead, and he needed to gain the loyalty of his soldiers. Alexander was a brilliant strategist, and he understood that his success on the battlefield depended on the loyalty and strength of his army. The beginning of the Persian campaign. In 334 BCE, Alexander embarked on the first major campaign of his life, an expedition that would not only establish his name in history but also change the fate of nations. With his army of 35,000 men, he crossed the Hellespont into Asia Minor, intent on bringing the mighty Persian Empire to its knees. The Persian Empire, under the rule of King Darius III, was the largest in the world. Its territory stretched from the Aegean Sea all the way to India, encompassing diverse peoples, cultures, and riches. But despite the vast size of the Persian Empire, Alexander's confidence was unshakable. His soldiers were loyal and battle-hardened, and their king was a brilliant strategist, known for his boldness and decisive tactics. Alexander's first significant battle would come soon, one that would set the stage for the next decade of his military conquest. The Battle of Granicus. The Battle of Granicus, fought in May of 334 BCE, was the first major confrontation between Alexander and the Persians. The Persian forces, led by local satraps, were positioned on the opposite bank of the Granicus River, blocking Alexander's advance into Asia Minor. Although vastly outnumbered, Alexander's forces were swift and relentless. In a daring move, Alexander led his cavalry straight into the river, charging at the Persian forces. It was a bold gamble, one that would either make or break him. The Persians underestimated his resolve, and the Macedonian forces overwhelmed them. The Persians were decisively defeated, and the victory was a clear statement that Alexander was a force to be reckoned with. The Battle of Granicus was more than just a military victory. It was a signal to the Persians and the rest of the world that Alexander was not a conventional king, he was a conqueror. This victory paved the way for the Macedonian army's continued march into the heart of the Persian Empire. After the battle, Alexander freed the Greek cities that were under Persian control, earning the loyalty of the local populations and further solidifying his reputation as a liberator of Greek culture. The Siege of Halicarnassus. After Granicus, Alexander continued his advance south along the coast of Asia Minor, capturing several key cities. One of the most notable sieges was that of Halicarnassus, the stronghold of the Persian satraps in the region. Halicarnassus was a well-fortified city, and its defenders fought valiantly under the command of the Persian admiral, Memnon of Rhodes. The siege of Halicarnassus was brutal and prolonged, but Alexander's ingenuity and determination won the day. He employed sophisticated siege tactics, including the use of his navy, which allowed him to blockade the city by sea. The defenders fought fiercely, but in the end, the city fell. It was another notch in Alexander's belt, and another step closer to his ultimate goal, the heart of Persia, crossing into Syria and the Battle of Issus. By the time Alexander had reached the Levant, his reputation as a conqueror had spread across the ancient world. He had defeated Persian forces at every turn, liberating cities and gaining the support of local populations. But it was the next battle, fought in November of 333 BCE, that would be his greatest test yet, the Battle of Issus. The Battle of Issus saw the Macedonian army face off against King Darius III's massive Persian forces. Darius, confident in his numerical superiority, assembled an army of more than 100,000 soldiers. Alexander's forces, in contrast, numbered just 35,000. Despite the disparity in numbers, Alexander's strategy was clear. He would strike at the heart of Darius's command. In a remarkable feat of military genius, Alexander used his cavalry to outflank the Persian army, causing confusion and panic. Darius, seeing his army crumble, attempted to flee the battlefield, leaving his soldiers to their fate. The result was a crushing defeat for the Persians. Alexander's victory at Issus was a turning point, and it proved that even the might of the Persian Empire was no match for his military prowess. The fall of Tyre. After his victory at Issus, Alexander continued his march south toward the Phoenician coast. One of the most formidable cities he would face was Tyre, a fortified island city that had long been a Persian ally. Tyre stood as a powerful symbol of Persian resistance, and it would not fall easily. Tyre's defenses were formidable, surrounded by water and well-armed. But Alexander, always adaptable, used his army's ingenuity to create a causeway. a massive land bridge that allowed his forces to reach the city. The siege of Tyre lasted for several months, but eventually, the city fell. Alexander's forces breached the walls, and the city was captured. The victory at Tyre not only demonstrated Alexander's tactical brilliance, but also his relentless determination to overcome any obstacle in his path. The march toward Egypt. With Tyre secured, Alexander turned his attention to Egypt, which was under Persian control at the time. The Egyptians, weary of Persian rule, welcomed Alexander as a liberator. He entered Egypt in 332 BCE, where he was hailed as a hero and crowned pharaoh. But it wasn't just his military victories that would leave a lasting mark on Egypt. It was also the founding of a city that would bear his name for centuries to come, Alexandria. Alexander founded Alexandria at the mouth of the Nile River, a city that would become one of the greatest cultural and intellectual centers of the ancient world. The foundation of Alexandria symbolized Alexander's vision of blending cultures, of combining Greek and Egyptian traditions into a new, unified world. The march into Persia. With Egypt now under his control, Alexander's path was clear, the heart of the Persian Empire. Darius III, humiliated after his defeat at Issus, had gathered another massive army, determined to defend his kingdom from the unstoppable Macedonian advance. But Alexander, ever the bold strategist, was already preparing for his next major confrontation. The stage was set for the Battle of Gaugamela, one of the most legendary encounters in military history. The Battle of Gaugamela. In 331 BCE, the two armies met on the plains of Gaugamela, near modern-day Iraq. Darius, knowing that his survival depended on this battle, assembled one of the largest forces ever seen in the ancient world, approximately 100,000 to 250,000 men, including cavalry, infantry, and war chariots. His army was the pride of the Persian Empire, but Alexander's army was no less formidable, with around 47,000 men, including his famous cavalry and elite phalanx infantry. Despite being outnumbered, Alexander's tactical genius once again shone through. He deployed his forces in a unique formation, creating gaps in his lines to lure Darius into attacking. As the battle raged on, Alexander led a daring cavalry charge directly at Darius's position. The Persian king, witnessing his army faltering, fled the battlefield in panic, leaving his troops leaderless and vulnerable. With Darius's flight, the Persian army disintegrated. The Battle of Gaugamela was a decisive victory for Alexander, one that effectively ended Persian power in the region. Darius, now on the run, was soon assassinated by his own men, leaving the Persian throne vacant. Alexander, triumphant once more, was now the undisputed ruler of Persia. The fall of Persepolis. After Gaugamela, Alexander continued his advance, sweeping through the Persian heartland. The city of Persepolis, the ceremonial capital of the Persian Empire, was a symbol of Persian power. In 330 BCE, Alexander's army captured the city, and the royal palace was looted and set ablaze. Some historians believe that Alexander's decision to burn Persepolis was an act of revenge for the Persian invasion of Greece a century earlier. Others suggest it was an attempt to erase the last remnants of Persian imperial pride. The fall of Persepolis marked the symbolic end of the Persian Empire. Alexander now controlled one of the largest empires the world had ever seen. From Egypt to India, his conquests stretched across 3 continents, uniting them under his rule. But while his military campaigns were marked by incredible success, the empire he built was fraught with challenges. Alexander was not just a conqueror. He was a visionary leader who sought to integrate and unite the diverse cultures within his empire. The fusion of cultures. Unlike many conquerors who sought to impose their own culture on the lands they conquered, Alexander believed in blending Greek and Eastern traditions. His policy of fusion was revolutionary. He encouraged his soldiers to marry local women, promoted the adoption of Persian customs, and even adopted the Persian royal dress and court rituals. This blending of cultures became known as Hellenistic civilization, a unique synthesis of Greek, Egyptian, Persian, and Indian influences. But this policy was not without its controversies. Many of Alexander's Macedonian officers and soldiers, who had fought alongside him through countless battles, found his embrace of Eastern customs difficult to accept. The tension between Greek and Persian ways of life created friction within his army. Yet Alexander remained steadfast in his belief that the unity of the empire depended on cultural integration. By 326 BCE, Alexander's ambitions pushed him further east, into India. The campaign was long and arduous, but Alexander's army, driven by their leader's charisma and military genius, pressed on. Along the way, they encountered numerous kingdoms, each one eager to challenge the invader. But Alexander's forces were unstoppable until they reached the Indian subcontinent. The Battle of the Hydaspes, fought in 326 BCE against King Porus of India, was one of Alexander's most difficult and memorable engagements. The Indian king had an army that included war elephants, an unfamiliar sight for the Macedonian soldiers. But Alexander, ever the tactician, adapted his strategy. He crossed the river Hydaspes under the cover of darkness, catching Porus by surprise. The battle was hard fought, but in the end, Alexander's forces emerged victorious. The victory at the Hydaspes was one of Alexander's greatest military achievements. King Porus, impressed by Alexander's bravery and leadership, was treated with respect, and his kingdom was incorporated into Alexander's empire. However, after this battle, Alexander's army, exhausted from years of campaigning, refused to march any further. The soldiers, who had been fighting for nearly a decade, were longing to return home. Reluctantly, Alexander was forced to turn back. His journey back west would be no less challenging than his march east. His army faced numerous hardships, crossing deserts, enduring mutinies, and suffering heavy casualties. Despite these challenges, Alexander pressed on, knowing that his legacy as the world's greatest conqueror was already secured. During the return journey, Alexander founded new cities, including Alexandria Escate, or Alexandria the Furthest, in what is now modern-day Tajikistan. These cities helped to solidify his influence and spread Greek culture across his empire. But as Alexander's empire stretched from Greece to India, cracks began to appear. Alexander's illness and death. In 323 BCE, after returning to Babylon, Alexander fell ill. The cause of his sudden illness has been the subject of debate for centuries. Some say it was due to a fever brought on by a tropical disease. Others speculate that he was poisoned. Whatever the cause, Alexander's condition rapidly worsened, and on June 10, 323 BCE, at the age of 32, Alexander the Great died. His death marked the end of an era. His empire, though vast, was left without a clear heir. His generals, known as the Diadochi, would soon fight among themselves for control of his territories. The world that Alexander had created would fracture into warring kingdoms, yet the legacy of his conquests lived on. The legacy of Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great may have died young, but his impact on the world was profound. The Hellenistic age, the period of cultural blending he had fostered, would continue long after his death. His cities, his vision of unity, and his military genius would shape the course of history for centuries. Alexander the Great was more than a conqueror. He was a visionary, a leader, and a symbol of what it means to strive for greatness. From the sands of Egypt to the plains of India, from the bustling streets of Alexandria to the battlefields of Persia, Alexander the Great's legacy remains etched in the pages of history. He was a king who conquered the world, but more importantly, he was a king who changed the world. The death of Alexander and the division of his empire. Alexander the Great's death in 323 BCE sent shockwaves across his empire. At just 32 years old, the king who had conquered most of the known world was gone. His sudden death left a power vacuum, and with no clear successor, the vast empire he had built began to unravel. Without a designated heir, the question arose, who would succeed Alexander the Great? His half-brother, Aridaeus, was mentally challenged, and Alexander's only legitimate son, Alexander IV, was just an infant. So instead of a smooth transition of power, a fierce struggle broke out among Alexander's top generals. These men, who had been Alexander's trusted companions during his campaigns, now fought for control of the empire. The empire, once united under Alexander, was divided into several regions, each ruled by one of his generals. Ptolemy took control of Egypt and founded the Ptolemaic dynasty, which would rule for nearly 300 years. Seleucus took the vast eastern territories, from Babylon to India, forming the Seleucid Empire. Antigonus, who had control over parts of Asia Minor, attempted to claim the title of king of all Alexander's domains, leading to conflict with the other generals. Meanwhile, Cassander took control of Macedonia and Greece. This division, though necessary for maintaining control over such a large empire, led to decades of warfare and instability. The Diadochi, each a powerful ruler in their own right, fought among themselves for dominance. The wars of the Diadochi lasted for more than 40 years, with shifting alliances, betrayals, and bloody battles. The Hellenistic Age. Although Alexander's empire was divided, his vision of cultural unity, his fusion of Greek and Eastern traditions, continued to influence the regions he had conquered. The Hellenistic Age, a period that followed Alexander's death, saw the spread of Greek culture and ideas across 3 continents: Europe, Asia, and Africa. The cities that Alexander had founded, most notably Alexandria in Egypt, became centers of learning, trade, and cultural exchange. Alexandria, with its famous library and great lighthouse, became the intellectual heart of the Mediterranean world, attracting scholars from all over. The blending of Greek, Persian, Egyptian, and Indian cultures gave birth to a new cosmopolitan world, a world that would continue to influence civilization for centuries. In science, philosophy, and the arts, the Hellenistic period brought significant advancements. The philosopher Epicurus, the mathematician Euclid, and the scientist Archimedes all flourished during this time. The spread of Greek language and culture, particularly the adoption of Greek as the lingua franca of the East, laid the foundations for the rise of Roman power in the centuries to come. The rise of Rome. Although Alexander's empire fractured after his death, his conquests played a crucial role in the rise of Rome. The Roman Republic, still in its early stages when Alexander died, would later absorb the territories once held by the Greeks. The Romans admired Alexander's military genius and sought to model their own conquests after his. The Macedonian phalanx, the tactical formation perfected by Alexander, was adopted by Roman legions and would become one of the cornerstones of Roman military success. In fact, Alexander's military innovations influenced the development of Roman warfare for centuries. But it wasn't just the Roman military that was shaped by Alexander's legacy. His vision of a unified world would resonate throughout Roman imperial expansion. By the 1st century BCE, the Romans had expanded their empire across much of the Mediterranean and beyond. Though Alexander's empire had crumbled long before, his legacy was still alive in the way that both the Greeks and Romans interacted with the world. Greek became the language of the educated, philosophy flourished, and the ideals of a cosmopolitan empire continued to influence Roman governance and culture. The myth of Alexander. Even after his death, Alexander continued to loom large in the collective imagination. His image evolved into that of a near-mythical figure, someone who had not only conquered the world, but had also been chosen by the gods. His death at such a young age, at the height of his power, only added to the sense of mystery that surrounded him. Historians, poets, and artists from both the Greek and Roman worlds created legends and works celebrating his achievements. The Alexander Romance, a collection of stories about his life, would be written in the centuries following his death. In these stories, Alexander became a symbol of divine favor, wisdom, and unstoppable ambition. He was portrayed not just as a conqueror, but as a hero, a figure whose legacy transcended time and geography. Even centuries after his death, Alexander became an iconic figure. The myth of his invincibility, his daring exploits, and his tireless pursuit of glory captured the imagination of people throughout history. His name became synonymous with greatness, an ideal that rulers and leaders aspired to throughout the ages. Alexander's legacy in the modern world. Today, Alexander's legacy can still be seen around the world. His influence is felt not only in the history of military strategy and governance, but also in art, literature, and culture. His achievements set a standard for military leaders for generations to come, from Napoleon Bonaparte to modern-day generals. In many ways, Alexander the Great's legacy lives on in the ideals he sought to achieve. A world where different cultures could coexist and thrive. A world where knowledge, exploration, and ambition were the hallmarks of a great civilization. His empire may have crumbled, but his vision of unity, his pursuit of greatness, and his determination to leave a lasting mark on the world are ideals that continue to inspire. Final reflections. Alexander the Great, in his short life, achieved what no one before him had thought possible. He united the known world under one banner, blending East and West and changing the course of history. Though his empire did not survive him, his name became immortal, and his story would be told for generations. From his military genius to his visionary leadership, Alexander's greatness endures as one of the most remarkable tales in human history. Thank you for watching this epic journey through the life and legacy of Alexander the Great. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories of history's greatest figures.